Hi everybody. I realise now we're quite thin on the ground here, which is not rare for me when I'm doing these things. But so I am Katie McMillan, and this is Samia Durrani. We are here to talk to you about women in cybersecurity and how to break those barriers down and empower women within the industry, bringing more women into it, and basically ideas and things that you guys can sort of throw back at us as things that we can do to try and enhance the sort of women in tech within cybersecurity specifically. Ooh. There we go. So, as I was saying, I'm Katie. I am a security manager within Avanade. We are a consultancy who specialise in Microsoft products, but I work in the security advisory team. And I've worked in technology and security for approximately 15 years now, and I've kind of had a varying journey during that time where I've started off on a help desk and worked my way up within tech, worked in infrastructure, worked in sort of infrastructure management, project management, portfolio management, and then I thought, you know what? Fancy working in security for a bit because it's quite interesting. There's things you can fix within security, which is nice to see, which is and it's also a way to secure organisations from the ground up, which is really interesting to me. So yeah, I'll pass over to Samia to introduce herself.
Thanks, Katie. So yeah, I'm Samia Durrani. I'm also a manager within Avanade in cybersecurity. So my background, I started off in kind of pre-sales, solution design, architecture, and then moved more into consultancy. I now kind of lead on the pre-sales, solution design, and architecture within our team, but also do a lot around financial services. So that's primarily my kind of sector, and very much interested in all things security and FSI. Within the UKI. I've got a bit of a different background, so I actually studied English literature when I went to university, so very non-technical, and somehow ended up being a manager in cybersecurity. So I'll take you along that squiggly career journey, I guess. But started off in English, wanted to very much be within media, and actually signed up to do kind of production management for quite a large TV organisation in the UK, and ended up editing lots of sporting footage for them because I was interested in sport and always have been. And they actually needed somebody to be able to edit their MMA, their martial arts sporting footage, because they didn't have anybody that was on site that knew the rules for MMA. And I'm a black belt in jiu-jitsu, so I knew the rules. So I was like, give me the job. I'm doing media. I like to do those type of sports. It's a perfect fit for me. So was doing that for a couple of years whilst also then thinking about what's my next step. Is it down the media and journalism route or is it somewhere else? And actually one of the things that kind of got brought to my attention was a piece of software that was out in the market from, I think it was IBM at the time, and they were producing sporting footage for Wimbledon, and they were able to do that in 30 seconds, and it would take me a full day to edit something like that. And they were able to use a lot of the kind of intricate sporting images and methodology, and able to use AI and automation to create this sporting footage. So automatically I was intrigued, right? You're able to reduce what my output is by, you know, a whole day into about 30 seconds. So let me explore the tech industry. So I went to do a master's in IT management and organizational change. Again, not security, very much looking from a management perspective and a holistic view. And then landed my first job within security, and now obviously work for Avanade. So yeah, bit of a squiggly path, but yeah, we're here today. So as Katie mentioned, we're talking about empowering females into cybersecurity. And I think this is quite a cool quote that I read recently from a book by Melinda Gates. For those of you who might not have come across Melinda Gates, she was the wife of Bill Gates and also co-founder to the Gates Foundation. So does a lot of work across tech and also charity work across different regions. She's written this quote, so tech is the most powerful industry in the world. It's creating the way we live our lives. And if women are not in tech, women will not have power. And I think if we just let that sink in, it's quite a powerful statement that women won't have power if they're not in tech. And ultimately, at the moment, as I mentioned before, is that tech powers every industry that you come across. Whether it's explicit or subtle, it empowers anything, whether it's a medical profession, whether it's, specifically IT, whether it's education or teaching, it covers all of these different aspects. So just to start with a bit of a story, so this is a word cloud, and some of the words within this word cloud have come from 50 girls between the age of 12 to 15 years old. So I was asked a few weeks ago to speak at a Microsoft-led event to a group of 50 girls, and my brief was speak to them and make cybersecurity sound interesting. Not a great task to try and achieve in an hour space, but we'll try and explain cybersecurity to a 12-year-old. Put your hand up if you've ever had to try and explain either development or software engineering or security to anyone that's below the age of 10. And has that been an easy task to explain? Right, so I had a task on my hands. So I turned up and I said to them, right, put on a board the first word that pops into your mind when it comes to cybersecurity. And it was really interesting to see some of the kind of words that came out. So some of the words were around fighting cyberbullying online. Some of them were around preventing hacks from happening or identity theft. Some was around the WhatsApp mum hack scandal. If you've heard of that, there was a recent one that was going around in the UK where someone was trying to act like a parent and asking for money. Unfortunately, there were people that were putting money into people's accounts, large sums of money. So you can Google that one. Quite a scary one, and really pulled at people's heartstrings as soon as you see the word mum or dad in a text message, right? And an urgent request. And then some of them were around coding, malware, some of them knew about. So automatically I was like, put your hand up if you've got a mobile phone, right? They're 12 to 15 years old. And 5 out of the 50 put their hand up. So naturally, my next question was, how do you know about cybersecurity? And I can see a few faces that went, 5 out of 50 that had their hand up. So the area that I was actually presenting in was an area in Old Trafford. So I'm from Manchester in the UK. So we've got obviously Manchester United, a big football supporter here. I know for my misery and sorrows, but I was presenting at UA92, which is a foundation that's been set up by the 92 Old Trafford football team. So Gary Neville and the likes, in joint partnership with Lancaster University. So they've set up this foundation, and they're specifically targeting schools from underprivileged backgrounds. So when we're looking at a class size of 50, and you put your hand up to say around 5 out of the 50 girls have mobile phones are expensive, right? To have a phone contract is quite an expensive task. So naturally, my next question was, how do you know about, stuff like this? And it was, well, our teachers are pretty good, which is great to hear. So a lot of the teachers were teaching them about privacy, teaching them about identity theft, teaching them about preventing cyberbullying online, family and friends being influences in a positive way. There was also things around TV series that they might have watched or YouTube videos. So it was interesting to see the different types of influences that they were being exposed to. Now, throughout the day, I've heard a lot of enthusiasm, which was really great, and a lot of putting their hands up, feeling empowered to speak, taking the microphone from me at one point and getting up on stage to start sharing their own insights into cybersecurity, which was fantastic. But from this event, I learned 3 key different things. So one is that non-technical skills are as valuable as technical skills. And the reason why I say this is that often we have this kind of jargon in the business industry, which is that hard skills versus soft skills. And hard skills often are depicted as things that you can get through training and certification. So things like coding might be one, or cyber standards and understanding web design or development. And the soft skills are seen to be more side of the leadership, creativeness, being a team player, showing your personal attributes. Now, interestingly enough, if we don't have individuals who are able to be leaders and team players and creatives, how are we able to effectively have the right code? How will we effectively have the right standards and make sure that people feel like they can be safe online? So I think there is a real kind of need for a shift in perspective when it comes to understanding around job descriptions around cybersecurity. So for young individuals to kind of look at their skill set, no matter what kind of domains they might be interested in, and be able to then tailor accordingly. Put your hand up if you knew what you wanted to do when you were about 12 years old. Like, did you know that you wanted to be a developer or you wanted to be in cybersecurity? Kind of. That's really cool. That's really awesome. When I was about 10, I probably wanted to play netball, right? I wasn't really, like, I didn't really know what the world had to offer, and I definitely didn't know about cybersecurity, and I definitely didn't know that cybersecurity was something for someone like me, right? From my background, and I didn't really see anybody that was like me doing the jobs out there like this. So to my second point, representation matters. So it was a really eye-opening to me is that as soon as they were able to see that I was up on stage and I was like, and they were like, well, so you do this, you do cybersecurity. And I'm like, yeah, it's not some hooded guy in a dark basement coding away with loads of like lines of code on a screen. That's not what cybersecurity is just defined as. You know, there are other sides of cybersecurity. So it's a really cool quote that you can see there, which is by Yara Shahidi. If you don't know who she is, she's quite a famous actress in the US. She's been in some really cool movies, so you can Google her afterwards. But she stated this, which is representation matters. If a child grows up never seeing themselves represented as successful or as the hero, then they are an anomaly if they succeed and the expectation if they fail. And that's quite sad that we live in a world where it's almost an expectation that females will be not as educated in a particular area or won't have the same skill set or won't be able to reach the same level. That shouldn't be the case, and it shouldn't be the norm. We should be having a more equal and fairer society where we don't underestimate. And that leads me on to the third point, which is stop underestimating that girls are not interested in cybersecurity or that females are not interested in cybersecurity. When I went to this day, it was so interesting to me that even though some of them had never really heard of the topic, they were really intrigued to find out more. They were really enthusiastic. But I think that often we have this depiction that specific items or specific things are for boys and specific things are for girls. And actually, you know, if we come to these type of arenas and areas to actually say, well, we can break down these stereotypes and break down these biases that we have, it creates a more fair and equal entry into cybersecurity. So before I move on, I'll hand over to Katie to link to what I've just said around the word cloud.
Yeah, so I'm gonna walk across the stage, and I normally walk around when I'm talking, but I'm not gonna do that because it's really creaky up here, and I don't think that anybody wants to hear the stage creaking as I'm walking around. So I'll stand straight for a change. So my input into this word cloud was I put a little post on LinkedIn. If anybody follows me on LinkedIn, they will have seen this put up. And I asked everybody in my network to give me 3 words that came to mind when they were thinking about women in cybersecurity. So there was, as a sort of differentiation from the young people that Samia was speaking to, there was a lot of talk around passion, brilliance, awesomeness, powerful, instinctive. You're looking at all of these words here, visionary, but then there was the underrepresented, and the rare, and the outnumbered. So there was quite a good mix between that. And I find that the people who've come up with the positive words on that screen are the people who have seen the success that women in cybersecurity can produce through their day-to-day work, their day-to-day interactions like this, their day-to-day sort of passion for cybersecurity as it stands. What I have found in all of this, that it sits, yes, within cybersecurity. There are gaps within different technical fields around security. So software development is a really key area where we don't have a lot of women in there, which is such a shame, because there's such a skills gap that could be filled by that untapped level of a passion and of talent that we can pull into the sector. And what I wanted to work out, and what we're trying to determine here, is why is that the case? Why women don't want to come and work in cybersecurity or in technology in general? And what are the barriers there? Why is there still a barrier now in 2024 to women in tech? I had a very different path to Samia, where I was, although I started my tech career at the age of 27, when I started on that help desk. Prior to that, I had a degree in journalism, and I graduated and didn't know what to do with myself. So I worked in a call centre for a period of years. I had a little boy during that time as well. And then at the age of 27 went, you know what, I really want to change. I want to do something different. So that's when I went into tech. And when I started on the help desk, I had some really awful experiences as a woman in tech. And having now worked in technology for that period of time, I now feel that, yes, the industry has come on leaps and bounds, but there are still those barriers and those some really, really shocking ways of working. So I've had experience. I mentor women in tech as well. I've had experiences where one of my mentees had a male lecturer who was really quite awful to her because she was a woman and she was the only woman on the course. So he held her to a higher standard, and he was really quite nasty, but there wasn't anything that the university could do to help her in that situation, because the lecturer themselves had tenure and they just had to remove her from that situation. There was no way to discipline him in that situation, which is quite shocking, really, if you think about it. I've been in situations where a woman is expected to take the notes because she's the woman in the meeting. That happens more regularly than not, and that is stereotyping, and it's just it's not the right way to use the talent that you've got within women in tech. So I believe that we're going to pass this back over to Samia to talk around some of the fair opportunities in cybersecurity.
Thanks, Katie. So according to NCSE, with a recent report, females represent approximately 25% of the cybersecurity workforce. And within that, there are limited individuals that are part of leadership positions or influencing positions. So what is equality versus equity? I think this is a really nice way of depicting it. I didn't draw that out or create that, right? But as a disclaimer, but I think it's a really cool one to show people when asking about the differences. And why does it matter? That's the most important question here. So equality really is great, and it's about ensuring that everybody has the same opportunities. And a lot of organizations are focusing on that, which is fantastic and should be continued. But equality is often an oversight. And what does equality actually mean? Equality means giving people fair opportunities and access to resources, and taking into account the different backgrounds that people are from. So why does knowing the difference actually matter? It means that we're able to break down the institutional patriarchy or racism or biases that exist within organizations. How many people have felt like they can't apply for a position or a job because they might miss one of the criteria on the actual application? I'll put my hand up as well. Right? Okay, it's really cool if you feel like you can, because you must have some awesome managers or awesome people around you. But when we've asked this question before, the amount of hands that do go up, and often it is the females in the room, right? In terms of there will be a job description and you feel like you can't apply for it because there might be a specific line item. I know for me personally, it used to be, you need to have a background in computer science and know how to code in JavaScript. And I was like, I don't know how to do any of that, and I don't have any interest in knowing how to do any of that. But I've got all of the other skill sets that can make your business successful, and I can add in impact and value into all of the other areas that you would like for that job role, whether it's SOC, SEAM, MDR, you name it. So it's interesting to see the discrepancies there. In regards to, so what can we do about this? So McKinsey's recently written a report around women in the workplace, and as you can see there, the quote, it says that the biggest obstacle keeping women from enhancing in their careers is what they call a broken rung. So what do we mean by that? We mean a broken ladder. Often there are lots of different initiatives into entry into the workforce. So now, I know in the UK and in other parts of the world as well, is that people can come into the career force from other areas. So let's say you've worked in marketing or HR and you want to work in cybersecurity. There's now initiatives to train people and put them on a fast track into particular areas in cyber. There's also different areas. We recently had it where we've hired lots of athletes. So I was mentoring an Olympic athlete. She just retired at the age of 30 from doing sprinting. She's won medals, toured the world, right? And now decided to get a job within tech. And she wanted to get specific experience in cyber. And kind of looks at a CV, and it's like, I've ran this race and I've trained for this, right? And you're like, you're awesome. But we need to make sure that we translate all of your awesome qualities with how you provide with leadership and how you're able to be competitive and strategic into translating into the cyber world. And that does translate really well and effectively in terms of incident response. You need to be proactive. You need to make sure that you're able to command a room effectively. You need to make sure that you're a team player and you're able to effectively respond to things and look at things holistically and take on board feedback, not as a critique, but as a way to move forward. So all of these type of aspects of things are really important to look at into breaking into the industry. But what we must be doing as well is making sure that once people are entering into the cybersecurity career, that they're able to continuously feel like they're supported and continuously feel like they can progress within their career. So there's no kind of glass ceiling. How many people feel like they could reach the North Star of, I want to become, a director or a lead engineer or whatever it might be in this room? Yeah, that's 3. Right, yeah? So it's interesting to see because I feel like a lot of the time there's a bit of a, not really sure. And no matter what type of gender you are, there will always be kind of obstacles and things that need to be looked at and broken down, because being male or female doesn't just equate to the success of somebody, and that's what we're trying to look at here. It's interesting as well because there's some recent reports that have been mentioned by UNICEF, but also in the book that I mentioned before by Melinda Gates, which talks about unpaid labor. Who knows anything about unpaid labor? And who knows what it's defined as? Just shout out, whoever. No one wants to shout out? No, yeah, it's a bit of a tricky topic, right? Because you kind of like, how do I define it? Because in my world, and in a lot of people's worlds, it's defined as doing the cooking and the cleaning and the chores and picking up the children, right? And running the household and putting petrol in the car. It's all of the stuff that's outside of work that you're not getting paid for on a day-to-day basis. But if you look at within your own households and you look at other people's households globally, you will see a discrepancy that still exists, unfortunately. It might not be the same for everybody. I've grown up in a household where it's always been a 50-50 split. So thanks, Dad. I've always seen a great representation in terms of like, there will be somebody that's working and also doing all of the rest of the chores, right? But I know that it's not the same for everybody. And what impact does that have on females? And what impact does that have on females being enabled to then progress in careers and spend time on education or doing other work interests or hobbies? So those are the type of things that sometimes needs to be kind of considered when looking at empowering women into cybersecurity. Diana Elson, who is quite a famous economist, mentioned 3 different ways to kind of tackle this, which is 1, recognize. So the governments need to start to track unpaid work and track where people are dividing their time. 2 is to make sure that we're reducing it, so looking at automation technologies to make sure that we're able to enhance people's lifestyles and livelihood. I mean, you can look at like way back when, right, when people were having to hand wash clothes and now we have a washing machine, magic, right? But that's a great example into allowing females into actually doing more work or have other interests and hobbies outside of doing the chores. And then finally is to redistribute. So eventually to be able to educate people and break down the stereotypes between what is defined as male versus female. Now, I'm not saying that, it has to be, an equal split. There might be different dividing factors and different social circumstances that need to be taken into consideration. But those are the type of things that can enable females to potentially have more kind of opportunities moving forward. So I'll pass over to Katie.
Okay, so I'm going to talk around the challenges and the solution here. Now, there's a certain amount of underrepresentation within technology. As Samia said before, 25% of women are now working in cybersecurity compared to the 75% of men. Now that is actually better, a lot better than in sort of the figures from 2013, which were, I think it was something like 13% or something along those lines. So we have improved, but it's stayed pretty stagnant since 2019. We haven't made a lot of progress during that time. And there's lots of factors for that. And a lot of it's historic, a lot of it is the stereotyping. Yes, gender bias is part of it, but it's not all of it. So from school age, we are almost, in the UK at least, it's stereotyped to certain gender roles. And it's not on purpose. People are doing this, it's all subconscious. So you have, for example, naturally, gender reveal parties, for example. Let's put that out there. When somebody reveals a gender, what do? They put pink balloons or blue balloons, don't they? So you're instantly pigeonholing a child before they're even born into a certain role. And nobody wants that. Nobody wants to be given a job specifically because they are male or female. No one wants that at all. There's a disparity there. And it's something that we can work on and something that we can look to challenge within our own organisations. We've got a really fantastic organisation called We Are Tech Women in the UK, and all the figures there, I'm not going to read them out, you can see those figures there. We can give you that link at any point if you want to have a look at those. But it gives you some fantastic comparisons as to why, as to the statistics within, sort of for women in tech, generally from within the UK and beyond. And it's quite interesting to look at that. So does anyone disagree in this room that there is still gender bias out there? Anybody disagree with that? No, that's a good start. I'm liking this. This is good. And the stereotyping. Has anyone been in a situation where they have been stereotyped at work from a male or female gender bias perspective? Yeah? Excellent. And it's really interesting, because if you are stereotyped in a certain situation, how does it make you feel? Anybody want to shout up? Yeah, pretty rubbish, doesn't it? You don't feel good. It makes you feel you don't feel respected, you don't feel valued, and you don't feel that your input is worth as much as the other people in the room. And it's not fair, and nobody should have to feel that way. So from a culture and society perspective, obviously when we've talked about the gender reveal part of things, but you've got cultural implications as well. So there's unconscious bias everywhere, absolutely everywhere. I don't think anybody in this room is going to tell me that they don't have unconscious bias. Can anyone tell me they don't have an unconscious bias at all? No, because we all know we have it. But the big thing is, if you know that you've got an unconscious bias and you uncover that, then you work to combat it, and you realize, okay, that's my bias. I'm going to have to work against that, because that's not right, and I should not be biased in that way at all. So that's a solution to your unconscious bias. But not everybody wants to change. So it's about calling that out. So I've been sat in meetings before where I felt somebody was either stereotyped or underrepresented within that meeting. They've been told to do something that they were not, they shouldn't have been, just based on their gender role or a stereotype or a bias within that meeting. I've gone into meetings with a member of my staff, and they have instantly, a salesperson will speak to my male member of staff because they think that person is the most senior person in the room. And I've done that over and over again and had to correct the people in the room. But I've also seen that happen to junior members of my team, and I will call that out every time, because it isn't fair. People will roll their eyes, people will shake their heads at calling things out in that situation, or they'll say, oh, is that still a thing? It really is still a thing, and it happens all the time. So it's something that we should all combat day to day. Also, there's the safety and comfort within your organisation. So have you ever do you ever feel safe? Well, does everyone feel safe travelling on their own to another country on their own? Who feels safe travelling to another country on their own? Depends on the country, yeah, absolutely, yeah. But if, okay, so does everybody feel comfortable walking in the dark in a country they don't know, in an area they don't know? Who feels comfortable walking in the dark in an area they don't know? Nobody, exactly. But I can guarantee that the women in the room are at more risk in that situation than the men in the room. And that's wrong. It shouldn't be the case, but it is something that women feel much more in depth than men do day to day. And I think that the men in the room can probably say, yeah, I can understand that. You can understand why that is. And it's not something that should happen in this day and age, but it's true. So the safety and comfort is something that that we can look at within our organisations to encourage women to join the organisation and take on security roles. So solutions. I'm going to look at the solutions now, because I could just kind of go on about the challenges forever and I'll bore you. It's not worth it. So friends and family. You can encourage all of your friends and family. Who has children and nieces and nephews in this room? Yeah? And you can encourage them and their views and explain to them. I tutor 14, 15-year-old girls in security and computer science. I have a 15-year-old boy at home, but I tutor a couple of the girls on the course, because it's important to me to empower them and to make them realise that actually they can do that too. There's no reason why they can't. But the amount of girls on the course is 2 or 3, whereas there's loads of boys. So you can absolutely encourage your friends and family to kind of work in tech. There's also at the education awareness piece, which I've just touched upon there, but you've also, sessions like this, coming to sessions like this, obviously I'm well aware that this session is quite low on the ground. We don't have a lot of people here. And that happens because of the content. It's an uncomfortable discussion. And if I suppose another underrepresentation question for you, how many people in this room have been interviewed by a panel full of women, just women? Okay, that's quite typical. And how many people in this room have been interviewed by a panel all men? Okay, that's most of the room. And that is typical, and that's just because of underrepresentation. It's not because we've got, but can you imagine being, as a man, the men in the room, can you imagine being interviewed by a panel full of women, and that might make you feel a little bit more uncomfortable than because you're not represented on that panel. And that can cause women to feel uncomfortable and not necessarily unsafe, but uncomfortable in a situation like that. There's also the flexibility, which Samia touched upon quite nicely around that unpaid work. The unpaid work, not everybody should have to have, women shouldn't have to do all of the work in the house. We know this. We're not daft. None of us are daft. We know that shouldn't be the case. And it isn't the case in most places now, but I think there's a pressure that women put on themselves to do that work, to do that extra bits and pieces. I also find that I've had questions where, oh, who's looking after your son today? His dad. Oh, is he babysitting? No, he's not babysitting, he's parenting. That's just what happens, but people assume that there's an assumption there sometimes around that the man is babysitting their own children, and that's not the case. It's a parenting, isn't it? That's what the way that relationships and the way that families should work. I have had a really good experiences with allies within technology, and I've had a really great male leaders who have championed me in exactly the same way as they would the men that are at similar levels, and I've been really lucky to have some great leaders. I have also known lots of women who've had some pretty awful ones, and I've had some awful stories. It's not always the case, but having allies there and people in the room who have your back is really, really important. It's why I mentor women in tech, because we put a lot of pressure on ourselves. We put a lot more pressure on ourselves than we should do to succeed in something, because we feel that we have to go the extra mile to get the same response from somebody that a man would get. Again, it's not everybody's going to feel the same way, but some people do, and that's not fair, is it? It's not how it should be. So having male or female allies within your organization who will help you and sort of push forward in certain situations and be the shining star to try and push you forward, empower you, make you feel included in things. Or somebody that you can go to if you feel a little bit rubbish about something hasn't gone your way, you should be able to do that. So allyship is really, really important to me. So this is kind of a summary of everything that we've said that you could use to help. So engaging with the younger generation generally around the technical careers. If you have kids, your nieces, your nephews, your friends' kids, however that works for you, going into schools, having those conversations and saying, yes, come and work in tech. We really want to make make cybersecurity much more representative of all genders. And I think it's a really, really key. And I love going into schools because it's great fun, because they actually talking to them and trying to uncover their own unconscious bias is quite interesting to see how it all works and how it all pieces together. Finding good examples of female leaders. Now, I've also had some fantastic mentors over my career, and I try to be that mentor for other people too, because having somebody that you can look at and go, you did it, give me help me work out how I get to that point. Not everybody's confident, not everybody, and absolutely fantastic that some of you are really, really comfortable that you are going to get there as CEO of an organisation, but there's lots of people who don't have that confidence yet, and that's what I feel my responsibility is, to build that confidence of other people and to make sure that they feel they can do that too. Providing learning and growth opportunities. So I know that Samia also touched upon the bringing people over who have transferable skills. Transferable skills is massive. Obviously, I had my call centre career and then went into technology and worked my way up from the help desk level upwards. But I did find that that having somebody open a door for me was really, really helpful. And I ended up getting into security because that happened to me. I was in infrastructure and somebody went, you know what, come and work for my consultancy and we'll teach you security from scratch, which is absolutely fantastic. And it's something that more people should do. And it's something that I try to do. I often say, yes, we've got a skills gap. Bring these people over because they don't have enough to do. We need more people. It just makes sense. Looking at the language that we use in advertising to appeal to all genders. So the recruitment that we've had to do over the years, there was quite a few pieces of analysis done on those recruitment adverts and how they appeal to women and how they appeal to men, and actually using strong words and certain words that came across as assertive or that had negative connotations to them. Some women were just like, oh, I don't want to work there because that doesn't feel right. I don't feel that's the right fit for me. And again, that shouldn't be the case, but also if women are used to applying to certain roles, maybe we need to soften the language a bit. Maybe we need to make that much more inclusive. I've also found when we're looking at the adverts, and if it does say desirable, and you don't hit all of those areas, again, it does put people off. But if we look at the job spec and say, actually, yes, okay, we'll move that down to desirable rather than essential, brilliant. We can we widen the net a little bit, and it doesn't take long to look at CVs and work out who's the right fit for a job either way. But even having workshops that you work with people on their CVs, on their covering letters and things like that for applying for roles is really good. And I've got a couple of friends who've worked on lots and lots of women in cyber events and training courses that they've done within the UK and in Canada around building more and more sort of graduate level positions for women in cybersecurity, which is great. Looking at flexible opportunities where possible. Now, flexibility, we're managing to do the flexibility where we've got maternity and paternity now, where there's an even split, and that's fantastic. But we don't have that. That flexibility doesn't always feed into things for the childcare element. Those flexible working opportunities where you can condense your hours, whether you can take time off for appointments. There's people should be putting more awareness around issues that affect women. So there are issues that affect women that don't affect men. That's just one of there are issues that affect men that don't affect women as well, absolutely. And we should have an equal representation of all of that. What I find is we don't talk about menopause enough, we don't talk about periods enough, we don't talk about the things that we don't talk about pregnancy enough and issues with pregnancy. We don't talk about baby loss enough. We don't talk about lots of things that affect women that affect men on a lesser scale. And we also don't talk about the things that affect men. So things like prostate cancer or testicular cancer, or things that are going to affect men in much more scale than would affect women. So it is important to make sure there's an even split within your organisation. Yes, apprenticeships, coaching and mentoring. I've touched upon that an awful lot, but so I'm going to talk about the unconscious bias again as to finish this up. Has anybody in this room identified their own unconscious bias at any point? Does anyone want to give us an example of unconscious bias that they've combated? Yeah, go for it.
Yes, you did mention sort of the unconscious guy, that's the stereotype.
Yeah.
I've been to a few kind of sales meetings as tech, and by accident being better dressed than the sales guy. And what happens kind of the unconscious communication is that straight away kind of the sales guy starts talking to me, and the tech guy starts talking to the sales guy.
Ah.
That happened a few times, so then I understood how much clothing communicates even among the guys. Instantly you start talking to the guy that's dressed similar to yourself.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right, because it's who you identify with, isn't it? So if you're dressed in a certain way and someone else is dressed in that way too, you identify with them, so you feel, oh yeah, they must be the person I need to speak to right now. Absolutely, yeah. That's yeah.
Understand that sort of helps a bit because things goes faster. So it's sort of an optimization.
Yeah.
And also it's a conscious bias, and it might be bad, but it's also a reason why we do it, because it's like optimizing for some speed or something.
Yeah, yeah, I suppose, yeah. So you're using that unconscious bias to your advantage in that situation, in a sales situation. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And people do use unconscious bias to their advantage. I think from my perspective, I've worked on my own unconscious bias from. Has anyone done the assessments where you can assess your own unconscious bias online, and you can do a little quiz to work out what your unconscious bias is? Yeah, so it's like I did a quiz, and and it was one where there was a child who'd been in a car crash, and the father had died in the car crash, and the child had to go to theatre to have an operation, and the surgeon came up and went, "Oh, I can't do this operation. This is my child." And instantly, and it's like a riddle, and people are like, "Oh, why can't they do the operation?" And obviously the obvious answer when you think about it is it was the mother who was the surgeon. But because of my own unconscious bias that most surgeons are men, which I don't know why it's in my head that way, but it was, I didn't get the riddle for ages. It took me ages to work it out. And you think, why is that in my head? But it's, yeah, most surgeons are men in my head. It's bizarre, isn't it? Has anyone else got an example of unconscious bias they've had? No? Okay, that's good. That's good. What about you, Samia? Have you had any unconscious bias that you've seen over the...
Oh, yes.
One or two.
One or two. I will tell you this story, though. I had a meeting when I was quite early on in my career, and I was tasked to lead quite a large bid, so in pre-sale. So we're looking at around 10 million worth of cybersecurity deal. So I had to go and speak to some of the C-suite. Now, when I walked inside the room, I think, I can't remember what the title was of this individual, but he turned around, and he was the influence and decision maker on signing the deal. But he said, where's the lead? Where's Peter? And I was like, who's Peter? Apparently Peter had been working on this project around 20 years previously to when I started the organization. And he was really fascinated with the fact that he really wanted to speak to a male and couldn't wrap his head around why there was now this female, pretty young person in front of him that had just graduated and been tasked with kind of leading on this. And it was a couple of those biases there, which is not just around being a female, but also, you know, my ethnicity and my background, right? There was a predominantly white-looking room. It wasn't, you know, there wasn't people from different backgrounds. I was female, and then also young, right? I'd just come out of university. So there's a couple of different kind of barriers to kind of break down in terms of unconscious bias. So it doesn't just stop at the gender part, like what you were saying, right? There's a lot of influencing factors into it. And as you said before, is that, as to this point, is allyship is a great thing to do in terms of what you can do to help. I had a male colleague that was in the meeting with me, and he stepped right in, right on time, and was like, yep, this is Samia, she's the most skilled person in the room to lead on this. She's got X, Y, Z, experiences. And just to have a person there to kind of reiterate and reconfirm, it's unfortunate that we even need to have that in the first place, right? You can't just trust my word. But, to have that was fantastic, and I was really grateful for that. Because in those situations, I feel like a lot of the time females can feel embarrassed almost and, feel really unconfident after that. And that shouldn't be the case. But because this male colleague stepped in, I felt almost like, okay, well, actually the embarrassment is on the person that had the unconscious bias, right? And we're in a position of power, and we're in a position that we don't need to go away then and feel unconfident about it because I had somebody in my corner. So yeah, just a funny one. Yeah.
That's really good. Yeah, I've definitely had experiences similar to that. It's unfortunate, and I don't like that we have to do these talks. I don't like that it's something that we're still underrepresented, and that and I still need to talk around things that have happened to myself or colleagues over the years. But I do feel that it's still important, and it's an important conversation to have. On that note, does anyone have any questions?
Yeah.
Go for it.
Sort of related to unconscious bias. You mentioned something interesting earlier on about the all-male panel or all-female panel, and I wonder if another form of unconscious bias is the idea that if you ask a man, oh, you bothered by being interviewed by a panel, an all-female panel, a lot of men might say, oh, no, I think I'm a important man, I can just do that. I mean, why would you come to someone else? Maybe because there's such a, the world is kind of built in that sort of male-centric way, and has been for quite a long time. There's this bias, oh, it's not a problem for me, why would it be a problem for someone else? Sort of not recognizing that people have different experiences, different life perspectives, and you have to appreciate someone else might have.
Yeah, so that's a really interesting point. So just to repeat, I don't know if anyone could hear from the front as well. You were mentioning around how people have different experiences, particularly when it comes to job interviews, and that a male might feel still confident actually to be interviewed by an all-female panel. It's really interesting. This is going to sound really rogue, but has anyone watched the recent Barbie film that came out in the cinemas? Right, so you remember when Ken decided to then enter into the real world, right? And suddenly it was like his world, right? And he was walking around and he's like, this is my world. Because for those of you that haven't seen the Barbie movie, it's not just about toys. And it's also not just about all of the unfortunate things that a recent comedian said, I think, at a big global event recently for the film industry, because he really diminished the value of the film. But off on a tangent there. So to explain is that Ken, so Barbie and Ken decides to walk into the real world, and in Barbie world actually is that all of the Barbies are seen to be powerful, so they own court. It's almost like a reverse of the real world in terms of its complete female empowerment. And he then walks into the real world, outer Barbie world, and realizes that this is the place for him because he feels respected when he walks around and he feels really confident. So to your point there is that it's that feeling, isn't it? It's the feeling that no matter what situation you're in, you feel like you can conquer it. And unfortunately, it's not the same for females. A lot of females, it's only taken, I don't know about yourself, Katie, but it's only taken me, right, a couple of years to be really settled into the security industry and really show that I know my stuff, to then not feel intimidated by going into a room full of men. There's still sometimes that, that nervousness, but, I've now been able to find ways of tackling it. But that's built over time, and it's built over people, empowering you to feel confident. Whereas, as you're mentioning, is that it's the reverse of, if you're so used to feeling confident in any situation that you go into and you walk into a room full of females, you automatically still sometimes might have that. I had a male colleague as well who, actually a male boss, who was fantastic, really good at like addressing unconscious biases, etc. And he said to me, Samia, you'll never guess. He goes, I just attended a meeting and it was all female. And he was like, and we were talking about cybersecurity. And he said, but at the start of every meeting, obviously you have a bit of chat. You might say, you know, what's the weather looking like? How's people's children doing? How's, you know, the football going on? And he was like, but they weren't talking about any of that. Like, they were actually talking about deep things, and they felt like they properly knew each other. He was like, but every time I join a call and it's all the males, we're just talking about the cricket scores or the football. And I thought that's so interesting. So, you know, and that's a stereotypical point of like, it really depends on who you're speaking to now, but there is this kind of idea and almost like a kind of way in which we connect with humans, right? And that feeling of confidence. So I hope that's kind of answered and correlated, but thanks for that. Has anyone got any other questions? Yeah.
Yeah, if you feel disrespected, do you have any good reply to that?
I'll let you take that one, Katie.
Well, yeah, I've over the years, and I've certainly had, and I've been up against an awful lot of feeling disrespected or uncomfortable, as I suppose is the other way. And that's kind of why I do this, because this is out of my comfort zone completely. So it's nice. But if I feel that I'm not respected in a work scenario, I will call somebody out and say, well, excuse me, I do actually know about that subject, and then I'll give them the reasons why that I know about that subject. But I'm not very good at advocating for myself. I'm really not. But I'm really good at advocating for other people. And if I see anybody else being disrespected, then I call that out right away. And that's, and yeah, I suppose it's something to do with my own confidence. I struggle more to call it out for myself than I do for other people. But I've been in situations where I've been paid less than a man. I've been in situations where I've had really quite chauvinistic things said to me, and it's really, it's awful, and it shouldn't be the case. I'm much better at calling out for myself now. However, I can also turn that around, and I do tend to. If it's something said in a jokey way, I'll turn it around and I'll say something jokey back to them, just to, it takes the edge off a bit, but then I'll call them on it later in a private situation, if it's in a public forum. But I don't let it get to me as much as I used to. I used to really take on all of the feedback and the nastiness. I'd take that in, and I'd overthink it, and I'd go, well, did I do something to deserve that? Or is this my fault? Am I not a strong leader? Am I not presenting myself in the same way? Why am I suddenly being brought in at this level and this person being brought in at this level with less experience? Why is that the case? And I would overthink it. Now I think that whatever happens for other people is down to the person who's employing them. That's their bias and their issue. So I need to call that out. So that's what I tend to do now. Does that answer that question? Okay. Yeah. We got any other questions? Okay, excellent. Well, thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you so much.